I mean, all things considered, that's kind of the most insane plot twist that you could casually drop on a third episode. In hindsight, this man being a god makes sense. I mean, it does. The future sight, and especially after you seemingly have him control the weather, I mean, at that point, you gotta have some sort of mythical, magical powers or something. But it's the way they casually reveal it. I was not even thinking he was a god up until this episode, but had I started thinking he might be, it would be something that I figured they would reveal on like episode 6, 9, I don't know, in that area. This kind of feels like something that you would keep to yourself for a bit, make the viewer kind of theory craft, kind of analyze what might happen. But then again, when you're dealing with a, I guess, quote-unquote god who's as wild as this man, just casually saying, hey bro, you got a god on your side, let's do some magical mumbo-jumbo. We have all these amazing supporters on our side, and then once the paid actors are no longer needed, we send them on their way. This is what I like about the Elusive Samurai. We can talk about the wonderful color palette, the expressive animation when things really start hitting the fan. But it's the way that they go about exploring these characters. It's in such an unorthodox way, yet somehow it works in this weird way. Like, this was easily the most different feeling episode for sure out of the three. It was, in my opinion, the slowest pace, but it actually allowed us to explore who are clearly going to be the main supporting cast, the retainers for our boy, who are all approximately the same age as him, seemingly, which is probably going to be good for him, given he kind of lost everything and now is rebuilding. But, you know, I said it last week, I was like, these two almost don't feel like they're human, but that wasn't me thinking that they were gods or monsters, it just, I felt like they were socially awkward weirdos. But apparently those socially awkward weirdos had way more going on than I was first giving credit. And if this guy's really her dad, I mean, that would have to make her part god too, huh? That's wild. Now, of course, I have full live reactions over on Patreon. If you want to see my full length thought to any of these episodes, it's going to be over there exclusively. So, The Elusive Samurai is a show that I've been absolutely adoring. Just, it's so fun, it's so wacky, and honestly, the game of tag, it's interesting how that's going to be the core way that we win against things. If we go and look at last week's episode with the game of tag wearing someone down and then cutting his head clean off, to, in this episode, we're going up against like an ancient mythical boar. We basically lead it off a cliff and it skewers itself. And honestly, I'm really interested to see what's gonna happen, because at least one time in this season before it wraps up, I imagine there's gonna be a larger scale battle than just him and his retainers, like maybe a miniature army of some sort or something, some sort of big battle, because I'm interested to see his level of tactics, because right now he's studying both with a sword but also with books and notes and learning how to because he was basically being raised as a puppet leader, someone who at face value was the quote-unquote leader, but everyone else pulled the strings from behind the scenes. So he actually doesn't know what it is to lead a village, an army, diplomacy, all that stuff, because he wasn't actually being raised for that. He was being raised like his father before him to be a puppet to be manipulated. So he actually does have a lot to learn, and I do appreciate that, you know, this man who now we know is a god, basically is forcing him to learn things. Though, we are dealing with a little scamp who likes to try to run away, so I guess it's a good thing we got Team Rocket level booby traps that try to stop him in his tracks. It's just kind of a weird episode, but I say that as a compliment. It's weird because, like, so much wildness is casually happening in this episode, and it does it with such confidence that you can't help but just respect it. I feel like if you put this content in any other studio's hands, it's kind of a coin toss if they would be able to make it land as well as it does here. Because at the end of the day, this episode can easily be summed down to as our boy has to start doing homework, schoolwork. Everyone else around him is, you know, just kind of dicking around, goofing off, and having a fun time. Not really the craziest idea, but when you actually look at this episode in its entirety, it does such a beautiful job. And what I said in my last video for the Elusive Samurai is that you can nitpick and you can take a lot of shots at face value and say, oh, there's no faces on these character models, or the art style is lesser here. But the thing about the art style that they went for with the Elusive Samurai is it has the ability to shift into abstract details a lot easier than something that tries to be hyper-realistic every other frame. So this is a show that when it does dumb down, because there are moments, it's not a stylistic choice, it's dumbing down moments where there's no faces at all because they don't want to have to animate faces. It's a decision to help on the production, but it's one that actually works okay because of the art style they're using. But on the other end of the spectrum, when it does go into the, oh my god, we're in a chase sequence, an action sequence, you can see how easily it shifts into that more abstract detail, and it works so fluidly and honestly effortlessly. It knows what it's doing in general. And I think by this point in the show's run, you should know if this art direction's for you or not. If I see people going into episodes 4, 5, and 6, and the episodes are looking like this, and they're still surprised that sometimes, the wide shots have no face details on them, or a couple of shots are a little underwhelming, I mean, we should understand that this is just going to be the type of show it's going to be, and we shouldn't really surprise Pikachu face every time it happens. That does seem to be like one of the main criticisms I see week after week with this show, is people acting like it's either a large group of people saying how beautiful the show looks with its color work, line work, and everything, or oh my god, there's so many in-between shots that just look god-awful. The anime community's brilliant, what can I say? But for me, I'm absolutely adoring it. And honestly, I think they did a pretty solid job. I think this is why I appreciate the slower pace of this episode, is we do have a few new characters. Yeah, we saw them last week, but we do have, the time to properly explore them and see what they're up to and see their different personalities. Like this one kid who's basically apparently, like, in terms of his generation, going to rise up the ranks to be literally the best of his generation as a samurai. I just like the overall vibe of the cast, and I appreciate that he's being surrounded by people, for the most part, that are relatively his same age, so it allows for them to actually feel like kids who can not only be kids and have fun, but also grow up in this hellish environment at the same pace, and, actually build something that's probably going to be long-lasting, like a lifetime bond, so to speak. The show has definitely impressed me. It's definitely one of the best shows of this season, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Now, if the production actually did crash and burn to the point where there's barely any animation and it's just a lot of static shots, sure, my tune's definitely going to change. But I'm liking the look of it. It almost feels like, in a weird way, it's like a mixture of how I love the look of Sunny Boy and Hell's Paradise. If you mix those two, that's kind of like the visual style I get for this show. Probably just me, but I really enjoy what they're doing visually. It's one of the more creative choices for a look of this year of anime. And in general, just to casually drop the, hey, I am a god, look at this magical mumbo jumbo. I thought he was bullshitting us, and then the rain literally stops. All that's so amazing, equally so when everyone's like, okay, we can go now. It's like he just had paid actors there, and it was just comedy gold. But yeah, it definitely explains his more robotic, not so like very socially awkward behavior. If he's a god, it kind of makes sense. Let me know your feelings on this week's episode, though, down below. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course, ring that bell, and like I mentioned, we got those full live reactions over on Patreon, and hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout-out. Alright, so today we got Thor Linsgaard, Vi, Anthony Silva, and Mac Velli. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.